Everybody feels pain, but more than 3 million Australians are prisoners of it, desperate for relief. It's spawned an industry that's become a breeding ground for exploitation.
You're desperate, you need help, they offer you desperate solutions and you take them.
He said, look, we do believe that this would improve your pain levels by about 60 to 70%. And I heard that and I thought, my God, that's life-changing.
We just saw that ray of light and thought, you beauty, but it was just a train. It came down and whacked us so hard.
Someone comes along and says, trust me, I'm a doctor, I'll take your pain away, you would believe them.
Australians spend more than $3 billion a year trying to treat chronic back pain. It's become an epidemic.
The pain industry is a huge, profitable business that everybody's in. So you've got anaesthetists, surgeons, pain specialists, GPs, and then in addition you've got drug companies, you've got device companies.
It's leaving a trail of misery, with some patients ending up in worse pain, some suffering paralysis, even death.
It was always just another surgery, another surgery, another surgery.
I feel like a lab rat. If this doesn't work, well, we'll try this. Well, that didn't work, we'll go a bit more invasive.
There's a correlation between financial reward for doing procedures and the frequency at which those procedures are done.
The pain sector has no idea we've got access to their medical billing data. And we've sent it to international fraud investigators and a team of leading Australian healthcare experts.
I was very startled by those findings. It really profoundly shocked me.
If it was policed in any kind of way, then you would find an immediate change.
What shocked you most?
The size of the problem.
We'll reveal how some medical professionals are draining our health system.
There's some obvious cowboys out there. Unfortunately, we met one.
We look inside the multi-billion-dollar pain industry and expose the ugly side of medicine. Patients' lives are being put at risk, and the regulator is failing to do its job.
It's just really hitting me now. I don't want to be here anymore.
The first words I heard was my specialist standing over me saying, I'm so sorry, Teresa. I'm so sorry, Teresa. He said it about 3 times. I'm so sorry. I've struck your spinal cord.
This is really, really exhausting.
Teresa Burberry's minor procedure turned into a major medical incident.
And I still didn't understand that my leg was paralysed because nobody actually said that. Nobody told me what was going on. Every day, I wake up and the first thing I see is my chair because it's plugged in next to my bed. I open my eyes and it's there. And then I recognise the pain. And sometimes the pain's the first thing to wake me up. And I look at that chair and I say, all right, we've got to do this again today.
Teresa underwent an operation for a spinal cord stimulator after she was hit by a car, leaving her with hip pain. The medical device is implanted in patients' backs. It sends electrical impulses into the spinal cord to relieve pain. Her doctor at a private pain clinic said it would help ease her pain.
The very first time I sat in his office and had a consult, he immediately suggested, have you thought about a spinal cord stimulator implant device?
So this was the first consultation?
This was the very first. And I remember thinking, my God, that's life-changing. That's me being able to go running again. That's me being able to be completely drug-free.
Teresa says her pain specialist played down the risks.
He actually said to me, nothing ever really goes wrong with this procedure. It's really safe. It's left me in worse pain than I could ever have imagined. I've been left with constant fire pain on my left leg and left side. So I've got a whole new area of pain and it doesn't stop. I've still got that niggly right hip from before, but funnily enough, that feels like a drop in the ocean these days because the pain, the entire area, like it's just on fire now.
And in terms of before you went in to get the stimulator, you were saying you were on 20 to 30 milligrams of painkillers. What sort of medication are you on now?
100 milligrams, just to make it through the day. Nobody tells you that paralysis means you won't feel anything, you won't feel any temperature, you know, no hot, cold, no touch, but all you'll feel is pain. You'll lose control of your proper bowel functions. You'll lose proper bladder function. You'll lose sexual function. Those things are all gone. Where is that in the warnings? Where is that in the information provided?
Research on spinal cord stimulators is mixed. There's a lack of credible scientific evidence as a treatment for chronic pain. Independent research even describes them as no better than a placebo. Leading orthopaedic surgeon Professor Ian Harris agrees. He co-wrote a review on them last year.
The conclusion is that they're no more effective than placebo. So there's uncertainty, and when we have uncertainty, we have practice variation. And the reason why there's uncertainty is because there's no good evidence that they actually work compared to not doing it.
Almost 90% of spinal cord stimulator procedures are done in private hospitals. They can cost up to $58,000.
In the private system, as it exists at the moment, I believe there is pressure to do that, just to keep the wheels of the system rolling, so to speak. There is pressure to fill beds, to fill operation lists.
The more you get paid for a procedure, the more likely it is that that procedure will be done.
Tens of thousands of spinal cord stimulators are implanted globally each year. Thousands end up in Australia. Success stories drive demand.
Hey girl, I can lick it, I can ride it while you slip it and slide it.
They're marketed as safe and effective. But behind the spin lies a global medical device industry making a fortune out of Australia.
They actually described our country as Treasure Island. This is an extremely lucrative procedure for a number of people in the sector, whether it's the pain specialist, the pain clinic, or the multinational big device companies. They all benefit.
Teresa is one of a growing number of Australians living with spinal surgery gone wrong.
When I encounter people out in public and they tell me, or they straight up ask me, what happened to you? I feel a sense of responsibility to share with them the full story. But I'm also absolutely terrified to tell them that a doctor did this. A doctor did this to me. And their whole world, their whole belief system comes crashing down.
Money and medicine make uncomfortable bedfellows, where profit is sometimes put ahead of the patient.
Emergency services.
It's my husband. He's
He's in massive pain. He's 55. He's in terrible pain.
This audio is the ambulance call Anne Myers made when she thought her husband Gordon was dying.
He was like on a roller coaster of pain, and he would be in so much pain that, you know, I've had to call several ambulances to take him to hospital because he's had so much chest pain.
Gordon Myers has been living in hell since a workplace accident in 2007.
What sort of pain are you in?
Well, I've got nerve pain, and it's every day because I don't know when that pain's going to hit me. I get a lot of tingling down my spine, right down to my feet. When it gets really bad, my body feels as though I'm having tremors.
Gordon's pain specialist recommended a spinal cord stimulator.
He was in more pain when he got home than he had before, plus the medication and...
Well, the first thing that I noticed was the thing was heating up inside me when I was charging. It was giving me electric shocks. I woke up flying through the air, out of bed, and it nearly threw me out the bedroom window, and I had to use all my strength not to go through the glass window.
He did say to me many, many times, get a knife and cut this thing out. I can't stand it.
Yeah.
And this is what it did to Gordon's back.
Felt like third-degree burns on my back.
So he got it removed. 4Corners has obtained exclusive data which shows how frequently spinal cord stimulators require patients to go back into an operating theatre.
Maybe they're saying that...
Dr. Rachel David has access to Australia's private health data as the CEO representing private health funds.
So for spinal cord stimulators, we looked at 6,000 people, and within a 3-year window, 41% came back for more surgery, whether that was another implant or something went wrong with that original procedure. If you compare that to hip replacement, only 2.7% of patients come back within a 3-year window. 41% is astonishingly high.
I feel like a piece of shit that's sitting in the garbage bin waiting to be picked up by the garbo drivers. It doesn't make you feel very human. It's probably the best way. They don't make you feel human, if that makes sense.
It's not just spinal cord stimulators. Spinal fusion is another popular procedure for treating chronic back pain. The private health system does the majority of them. That's where grandmother of 3, Trudy King, had hers done.
That's all I wanted, to live a pain-free life, which we all want, because the pain and the drugs, taking all those tablets and the morphine, it was just getting too much. It was the specialist who actually suggested the surgery.
Hello, everyone.
This is a video taken moments after she woke up from the first surgery in 2021.
My ankles won't lift up. I can't lift my feet up, so they're worried that the nerve's badly pinched. So I'm going back in for my second feeder.
What was going through your head?
I was terrified. I didn't understand why I couldn't move my feet. And no one really, the doctor didn't come and see me, so no one really told me what was going on.
There were serious complications.
Totally in ICU, unconscious, did not wake up.
Trudy was in a coma for almost 3 weeks, and when she finally left the hospital, she couldn't walk.
And I've got 3 grandbabies under 5, and I can't play with them like I want to. And now it's like Nanny's always sick or Nanny's sick. You know, I'm not the healthy Nana I always pictured that I would be with them. I think if I could get my hands on the surgeon, I'd like to just say to him, what the hell did you do?
Spinal fusion involves joining 2 or more bones in the spine permanently to prevent movement between them. Trudy had 3 bones fused together. She says after scans found disc degeneration. Professor Ian Harris says an MRI will pick up abnormalities on most people over 40.
They'll find degenerative changes, dehydrated discs and bulging discs. And so there's plenty of diagnoses. The more things you find, the more likely it is that you'll end up with somebody wanting to treat or correct that abnormality, even though correcting that abnormality might not help the patient because it might not be associated with their pain.
There is a small place for spinal fusion for people who might have broken their back or had a serious congenital deformity where their back is simply not able to function properly. But for back pain, we're saying that spinal fusion is a very expensive procedure that for a number of people just simply does not get results.
A rising number of health researchers from around the world have been questioning the benefits of spinal fusion to treat chronic back pain for years. Professor Harris is one of them.
There's only been a handful of trials, and those trials, when put together, don't show a clear benefit of surgery. Some surgeons are very unlikely to recommend the procedure. So when we get practice variation like that, it tells us that someone's wrong, that we need more science in medicine. Unfortunately, it's too easy for us because doctors have been put in a position where we make all the decisions. It's too easy for us to let these other incentives influence our decision-making. And it's too easy for us just to rely on our own observation.
Private hospitals do more than 70% of spinal fusions.
Private hospitals literally work on turnover. That's how they make their money, and many of them are for-profit organisations.
So when you say turnover, what do you mean?
Medical activity. So whether that be procedures, drugs, other interventions, it drives over-treatment because that's what's measured. You know, how many knee replacements were done last year? Is that enough? You know, should we be doing more? I get paid to do an operation. And so there's an incentive for me to do more operations.
I'm on this cycle. Pain doctors, neurologists. It's never ending. My life is just a full circle of doctors, constant doctors. Never stops. It's terrible. I'm worse now than I was before the surgery.
Trudy's doctors charged her private health insurance a fortune. We asked medical billing expert Dr. Margaret Foe to go through Trudy's records.
I don't have Trudy's full medical records, but I do have her complete private health records for the period when she was in hospital. Those records make it very clear that she was in an intensive care unit on a ventilator for nearly 3 weeks. A number of doctors came into the intensive care unit to provide additional services to Trudy. The services that they billed are services that require the doctor to have a discussion with the patient, not their relatives, not their colleagues, with the patient, because you have to explain treatment to the patient. Now, I do not understand how it is possible to have a discussion with an unconscious patient who is in a coma on a ventilator. So those records need to be looked at.
The chronic pain industry has become a breeding ground for financial abuse. 4Corners has obtained one of the largest databases of private health medical bills for analysis into spinal surgery. We have access to 6 private health funds, representing 25% of the industry.
An unfortunate reality in the Medicare system is what you did in the operating theatre and what you bill to Medicare can be 2 completely different things.
In Australia, medical billing is based on an honour system that doctors will bill correctly. When they lodge a claim with private health funds and Medicare, they're automatically paid without checking that the services were done.
Medical bills are paid on the basis of trust. It's a trust which is not founded in reality because after a while, when people realise that they're not being checked up on, they start first perhaps to push the boundaries.
There's an interesting trend there, isn't it?
Anaesthetist turned medical fraud investigator Dr. Simon Peck analysed the data of more than 23,000 anonymous patients with his Cambridge-based colleagues using their fraud detection software.
Well, I'm also interested in looking at
the same data was also probed by Sydney-based medical billing specialist Synapse, run by Dr. Margaret Foe.
That is odd.
The experts looked for red flags, such as inconsistencies in surgery times recorded by multiple people in the same operating theatre, who all bill separately.
We haven't looked at medical records, but there are many red flags in this data. This report suggests that there is a problem with misbilling and other things in the data.
There were enough discrepancies in time and across the data for us to be able to spot the outliers.
The findings are gobsmacking. Anaesthetists, who all bill in short blocks of time, were the worst offenders. In one health fund, a staggering 87% billed an anaesthetic time that was much longer than other people in the same operating theatre.
There are huge discrepancies between the surgical time and the anaesthetic time.
They found it was common for each anaesthetist to charge an extra 3 to 6 hours. And in one case in New South Wales, an anaesthetist billed 14 hours of time for a surgery their colleagues said lasted less than an hour.
I've looked at data from all around the world, and I would say the indicators of misbilling in the data that we were provided with is at the top end of the scale.
It gets worse.
They were putting these very invasive lines into major arteries and veins of the body. It's not like a drip. These are much more serious monitoring lines. They're putting them into very, very young people, 20-year-olds. And they're not without risk. They're dangerous, so...
We showed the findings to a team of leading healthcare experts.
I'm Dr. Chris Hayes. I'm a pain medicine specialist. Those findings that really profoundly shocked me.
I'm Ian Harris. I'm Professor of Orthopaedic Surgery and I've been a surgeon for nearly 30 years. It's an enormous problem. There's certainly a lack of oversight. Yeah, if it was policed in any kind of way, then you would find an immediate change in practice. That's for sure. It's obvious.
I'm Dr. Rachel David. I'm the CEO of Private Healthcare Australia, which represents health insurance funds. In this quite narrowly defined treatment area, if we extrapolate it across the whole industry, we're talking about $500 million that is being lost to Medicare and private health insurance as a consequence of the poor billing behaviour.
Are we looking at double exploitation here?
Yes, definitely. We are hitting the patient twice. We are exploiting them clinically by offering them treatments and procedures that can be harmful, and then a second time financially. And you can't disconnect those two things because every clinical service that has to be provided has to be paid for. So you can't disconnect the clinical from the money, certainly not in a fee-for-service system. Those two things are inextricably linked.
I had no sense of direction for nearly 12 months after that. I just stayed home, tried to keep the place spotless because that's how Gail liked it, and had nothing to do with virtually anybody else.
Retired policeman David Izzard is still coming to terms with the sudden loss of his wife of 43 years. Gail died after major spinal surgery in 2017. Her neurosurgeon was Tom Morris, who's since had conditions placed on him by the regulator, but he can still operate.
Do you remember when you first met Mr. Morris, what he was like?
Mr. Morris was like a knight on a silver steed. He was just the light. He was just so confident and, yeah, just made you feel like finally you found someone after all these years who will make a difference immediately. He told us he's very good at his work, and that for Gail to have any further surgery, you would need someone who had performed that type of surgery in the past and who was competent in doing that particular type of surgery, and that he had that experience, and that if anyone could help her, it was him. He just swept both of us up.
And she was in a lot of pain.
Constant pain, yes. She'd been suffering severe pain for many years. In '88 it was debilitating, and later on it became crippling.
Gail and David first met Mr. Morris in 2017. He'd been qualified as a neurosurgeon since 2016.
We assumed that he'd been a neurosurgeon for quite some time because the procedure he was talking about we knew was going to be difficult.
Gail was in poor health, making her higher risk for surgery. Mr. Morris performed 4 major surgeries on her over 7 months. 3 of them over an 8-week period.
Which was quite a huge undertaking because she was having from her thoracic spine down to her pelvis entirely fused. It's quite a significant undertaking.
Something went horribly wrong.
I got a phone call from Tom to say that everything had gone well. I got another phone call from Tom to say that Gail had had a catastrophic brain injury. Get in here, she's not going to make it.
Former neurosurgical nurse and lawyer Alison Speck is running a medical negligence case against Mr. Morris.
There's 2 main allegations of negligence. The first is that it was actually unreasonable to have recommended that procedure in the first place and performed it on Gail. And the second is an issue of consent.
Multiple hospital records show in the days before surgery, Gail got cold feet. Hours before the operation, she told a nurse of her doubts.
Their nursing staff noting that Gail has said to them words to the effect of, she's scared, she wants to call the surgery off, she doesn't want to go ahead, she's frightened, and that they would notify Mr. Morris.
We don't know if that message was passed on to Mr. Morris.
But then she has the surgery.
She had the surgery. There's nothing in the notes to suggest that Mr. Morris spoke to her or attended because there's nothing in the progress notes from him.
In his legal defence, Mr. Morris says he discussed the risks with Gail and David. He denies medical negligence and says Gail didn't withdraw consent. Medical records show he'd outlined the risks of surgery to Gail. Mr. Morris says he also received messages of gratitude from David Izzard after Gail's death, and he says he's never financially motivated when doing surgical interventions. Gail wasn't Mr Morris's only poor outcome, according to a 2021 decision by Victorian Tribunal, VCAT. It found he poses a serious risk. VCAT documents show he operated on the wrong part of an 81-year-old's spine at a regional hospital in 2018. And it noted 22 patients with surgical complications at Epworth, Richmond between 2017 and early 2018. Epworth's notes say he was reluctant to reduce the number of spinal surgeries.
So you can see from the VCAT judgment that they think Mr Morris poses a risk to the public as a surgeon, and they took immediate action to make sure that there are restrictions on his practicing certificate, essentially, what he can and can't do.
VCAT heard that Epworth didn't impose any restrictions on Mr Morris. It tried to deal with him internally, but he resigned in June 2018. Just a few months later, there were more patient complications, this time at St Vincent's. They reported him to the regulator AHPRA. Epworth declined to answer questions, but said patient safety is a priority.
I understand that they undertook their own review following some quite significant and awful outcomes there, and that sort of triggered AHPRA to investigate and therefore impose restrictions.
A VCAT ruling allows him to still operate as a surgeon, but under his current restrictions, he must consult with a supervisor. He's also allowed to be a surgical assistant. Mr Morris declined to be interviewed.
There's some obvious cowboys out there. Unfortunately, we met one.
Mr Morris's medical billing was also flagged in the VCAT documents by experts, which he disputed. We asked Dr Foe to look at Gail's health bills.
Gail's records raised the most concerns for me. So this included billing for surgical procedures that may not have been performed, and billing for hospital visits when there is no evidence in the record that those visits took place. And in fact, on one date, Gail wasn't even in hospital, yet a hospital visit was billed and paid. And it needs to be further investigated.
It's just not the same. It never will be. Sure, I've got some friends, but I miss my mate. We just saw that ray of light and thought, you beauty, there's the tunnel, there's a light at the end of it. But it was just a train. It came down and whacked us so hard.
For the last 6 months, I've been investigating the pain industry. And what's alarmed me most has been the slowness of the regulators, who are supposed to keep patients safe. The Therapeutic Goods Administration, or TGA, regulates medical devices. It runs a database that tracks harmful and negative patient outcomes. The TGA says there's been more than 2,000 adverse event reports related to spinal cord stimulators.
Paralysis.
Infection at the site.
Chest pain.
Spinal fluid leak.
Nerve irritation.
Sepsis.
Recurring electric shocks. Left side brain hemorrhage.
Does that sound high to you?
Yeah, look, it does. It sounds alarming to me. The last major scandal that we've dealt with in terms of medical implants was the use of hernia mesh for pelvic organ prolapse in women. For mesh, over the same period, there were 224 adverse events reported. And that, as we know now, was a major scandal in which a number of patients came to harm.
We also uncovered vast underreporting. one of the biggest device companies, Medtronic, had fewer than 10 adverse events related to its spinal cord stimulators in the database over a decade. We asked the private health funds to run the numbers.
We looked at 764 Medtronic generators or stimulators that were implanted, and of those, 30% were revised or required some sort of premature surgical intervention to reset them within the first 3 years, which would be either the device was replaced or a lead was replaced.
Australian sponsors of medical devices are legally required to report adverse events to the TGA. But the TGA has never taken any action for failures to report an adverse event relating to spinal cord stimulators. Medtronic denies underreporting and says it follows the TGA rules. We can't find evidence that Teresa or Gordon's stimulator horror stories were ever reported. The device companies won't comment on individual patients. They say their devices are safe and abide by the law.
I can't understand why the TGA haven't done more. I can't understand why the stimulator companies don't ring up people like me or even get me down to their big fancy offices and say, well, you know, what are the symptoms you've had? How do we improve this? All that sort of stuff.
The job of the regulator is to keep people safe. When it comes to spinal cord stimulators, its performance has been appalling. Its own database is littered with people who've been hurt by a device they believe is safe. The regulator launched a review, but that was 2 years ago, and we're still waiting. We asked the TGA for an interview, but it couldn't make the time. In a statement, it said approval of a device is based on the available evidence at the time. It said patient safety is a priority. It's no surprise some private pain clinics are making a fortune from stimulators, and the funds paying for them aren't happy. You're representing the private health funds. Many people would see them as making big profits. They were up 110% last year, while premiums are going up, and people are complaining that they're not getting as many services for what they're paying for. How do you answer those sort of criticisms?
I am absolutely confident that the health funds would spend even more money if they knew that it was on treatments that were working. What we're seeing with what we are spending is that it is simply putting people on a hamster wheel of more treatment, hospital admissions and revision surgery. That is not a good investment in people's care.
Pain specialist Dr. Chris Hayes stopped implanting stimulators 20 years ago.
I found that people were just not making good improvements, and to my mind, nothing substantial has changed in the scientific evidence over the last 20 years, other than to reinforce the view that this hasn't got good evidence to support it and that there is a substantial risk of harm. The pain industry is an interesting place in Australia. It is a bit of a jungle in some ways.
I just managed to find a way to see a life without depending on anything to support my pain. My desire was to live with colour and joy. That had all been removed by the spinal cord stimulator, the opioids, the nerve pain, the injections, the steroids, everything else. So the only way I was going to come out of that was find a way to leave those behind.
Jason Parker felt like a prisoner trapped inside the pain industry for years. Now he's finally made it out.
So when was the turning point?
When I got the machine out.
Jason's medical history is harrowing. He was in a terrible car accident, leaving him in agony. He later lost his legs to an infection. He's had the works: surgeries, stimulators, spinal fusion.
A lot of people are making an awful lot of money out of people's misery. I just was wasting away in a bedroom, essentially. The financial impact of not being able to work meant you had to go on the dole, and so I was in my parents' third bedroom. I lost my house. Everything, gone.
Jason had 10 spinal cord stimulator operations over 5 years.
I was expecting him to say, listen, mate, this ain't working. Let's just call it quits and I'm not going to put you through anymore. But it was always, there was another thing he could do to fix it.
Do you think it was the worst decision of your life?
Absolutely. They're Frankenstein machines. They are not built for the human body. And it's sold as the dream. It's sold as we've got your answer. Now, I sometimes feel that the answer was provided because I had the highest medical cover.
It's been a year since Jason had his stimulator removed.
I still am in pain, but I've learned to live and understand how my body deals with pain. I hope that somebody is out there going, you know what, maybe I won't take that step first.
What's clear, this industry can't cure chronic pain, but over-treatment is rife as the vulnerable seek hope and some unscrupulous practitioners see opportunity.
There is a big business element to this, given that 1 in 5 Australians or thereabouts experience chronic pain.
And it could be said they're walking around with a big dollar sign hanging around their neck.
I find that chronic pain is not well treated by cutting people and operating on them. So you have to start thinking more scientifically and objectively before offering the treatment. But there's no policing of that. I can offer a spine fusion on every patient that comes to see me with a degenerative disc in their back. Nobody's going to stop me from doing that.
And there's little appetite to change a system desperate for reform.
And are you in pain now?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Always.
I was a victim to it.
It's just the most horrific thing.
The only peace I get is when I'm asleep.
It really has destroyed our lives.
Once you get on that merry-go-round, it's extremely difficult to get off.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Why does all of this matter? What's so important about it?
It matters because it depletes our health system of the money it needs, and it's a patient safety issue. It's both. So it's misappropriation of funds, and you're putting patients at risk. So it matters a great deal if we don't keep shining a light into this very dark part of the health system. It will soon collapse. It's littered with waste and abuse. And I think Australians deserve to know the truth. Don't you?
It's left me in worse pain than I could ever have imagined. It's taken my mobility. It's taken my business. Taken my career. Taken my dignity at times. Taken relationships. And it's been the biggest injustice that I've ever faced in my life.